Inside the house, the dim light from the oil lamp cast a glow on Long's memorial photo, the late husband of Thu. In their wedding picture, Long beamed with joy in his white suit, his face radiating happiness as if it were the first day of their life together. But now, that very smile only tightened the grip on Thu's heart. Every feature of his face seemed to remind her that he was gone forever, leaving behind an emptiness that nothing could ever fill. The entire village of Bình Yên was shocked upon hearing the news of Long's passing in a workplace accident in the city. His departure was too sudden, cutting short countless dreams and unfinished plans he had with his wife. Once a vibrant and full of life woman, Thu had now become frail and pale. Day by day she drowned in grief, as if a part of her had left with him. In that small house, only Thu and old Mr. Quang, Long's father, remained. He always maintained a calm demeanor, but his eyes bore the weight of sorrow. At over 60 years of age, he had weathered many storms, but the pain of losing his only son was like a knife carving into his soul. Long was his pride, his greatest hope. Now, as he gazed at the empty courtyard where Long once happily carried baskets of flowers, Mr. Quang could only sit in silence, sipping his now cold tea, feeling as if his heart were shattering into pieces. That evening, after a simple dinner, when Thu had just finished cleaning up, Mr. Quang slowly stepped toward her. His calloused hands gently rested on her shoulder. Thu? He called softly, his voice trembling, carrying the weight of his emotions. I have something to discuss with you. Thu looked up, her eyes swollen and red after days of endless tears. Mr. Quang sat down, his gaze drifting into the distance as if searching for the right words. My child? He began, his voice choking. Before he left, Long thought ahead. He was afraid that if anything happened to him, our family would have no heir. So he stored his sperm at the hospital. I was thinking, if you are willing, you could consider artificial insemination. It would be a way to keep Long's bloodline alive and a hope for our family. His words struck like lightning on a clear day, leaving Thu utterly speechless. She stared at him in shock, overwhelmed by a storm of emotions, bewilderment, sorrow, and confusion. Tears streamed down her face, yet she couldn't even tell why she was crying. She shook her head, her voice quivering. Dad, I can't. This is too difficult for me. I'm afraid. Mr. Quang gazed at Thu for a long time before letting out a deep sigh. His eyes held emotions too heavy to put into words. I won't force you, he said softly, but I know Long loved you dearly. If he were still here, all he would want is for you to be happy. That night, Thu lay on her wooden bed, tossing and turning, unable to sleep. Mr. Quang's words echoed relentlessly in her mind. She stared out the window, where the silver moonlight gently illuminated the small courtyard, casting a soft glow over the flowers Long had once planted. Suddenly, his image flooded her thoughts, so vivid, so real, as if he had never left. She drifted into slumber, lost in aching nostalgia, and in her dream Long appeared. He said nothing, just stood there, gazing at her with tender eyes. He reached out and took her hand, a warm, gentle grasp, as if to say that he was still with her, always wishing for her to keep moving forward. Thu jolted awake. Dawn was breaking. She sat up, her heart heavy, but in her eyes a faint determination had begun to take shape. She exhaled deeply, ran a hand through her tousled hair, and thought to herself, Long, if this is what you want, I will try. For you and for our family. She sat on the porch, her hands gently resting on her stomach. Feeling the faint heartbeat of the tiny life growing inside her, Thu's heart swelled with a mix of happiness and anxiety. This child was everything she and Long had ever dreamed of. It was hope, the only part of him left in this world. But before her joy could fully blossom, the scrutinizing gazes and whispered words behind her back quickly cast a shadow over her life. The village market in the morning was always bustling with activity, the lively chatter of buyers and sellers, the calls of vendors echoing through the air, blending with the fresh scent of vegetables and the warm aroma of baked goods drifting in the wind. But for Thu, the market had become an invisible battlefield. The prying eyes, the sneering laughs as she walked past, made her back stiffen. The neighborly women who once spoke to her with warmth now huddled in small groups, casting glances in her direction and gossiping incessantly. She lost her husband long ago, and now, all of a sudden, she's pregnant? Could it be Mr. Quang? The old man still got plenty of strength, it seems. Rumors spread like a spark catching on a dry field. Before long, they had ignited an unstoppable storm. Thu heard every word, every whisper, and her heart clenched in pain. She lowered her head and walked quickly, trying to avoid the scrutinizing gazes that seemed eager to uncover a secret they had conjured up themselves. But she wasn't always strong enough to ignore their whispers. Once, as she was leaving, a neighbor called after her. Thu, you look different these days. Could it be that you have some good news you're keeping from us? The woman's knowing smile left Thu with no choice but to force a weak smile in return, muttering a few vague words before hurrying away. When she got home, she could no longer hold back. She shut the door tightly, sank to the floor, and burst into tears. Silent drops fell onto her hand, resting on her stomach. But she wasn't crying for herself. She was crying for the unborn child, for Long, and for Mr. Quang, her aging father-in-law, who silently bore the weight of all the gossip on her behalf. At the village communal house, where the elderly men gathered every afternoon for tea, the rumors about her never ceased. They whispered, "Old Quang is something else. His son is gone, yet suddenly, he's about to have a grandchild. Just look at Thu's belly. Who knows what's really going on? At this rate, we might have to call him Quang the rooster that lays eggs." Hearing those words, he simply remained silent. He didn't argue, nor did he defend himself. But when he returned home, his shoulders felt heavier, his gaze more distant. Every evening after dinner, he would sit on the porch, holding a cup of tea that had long gone cold, staring out over the vast fields before him. Thu knew what he was thinking about, Long the unborn grandchild, and the hardships their small family had to endure. One evening, after finishing her chores, Thu was about to head inside when Mr. Quang called her over. A gentle breeze swept through the porch, carrying the scent of wild grass and the steady chirping of crickets. His deep, warm voice broke the silence. "My dear, this village is small. People talk, but that's just how they are. I've lived long enough to know they only gossip to pass the time, but I don't want you to dwell on it too much. Don't let their words bring you down." Thu looked at him, her eyes glistening with tears. "Father, I'm not afraid of what they say about me. I'm afraid that they'll misunderstand you. They don't know the truth, but the things they say, I can't bear to hear them." Mr. Quang fell silent for a moment, as if searching for the right words. Then, he gently placed a thin yet steady hand on her shoulder. "I don't care what they think. As long as you and the baby are safe and healthy, I am willing to endure it all." His words felt like a beam of light, easing some of the pain weighing on Thu's heart. But Thu knew that in his aged eyes, there were worries that could never truly fade. Every morning, as she stepped outside to sweep the yard, she would see him sitting quietly on the bench, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon, where endless race fields stretched beneath the morning sun. He never spoke of it, but Boo understood that he was silently carrying everything on his shoulders, trying to protect her and the unborn child. She thought to herself, "I won't let father down. I will be strong, for him, for Long, and for this child." Yet deep inside, she still wondered whether she had the strength to endure it all. That evening, a light rain began to fall. Droplets rolled down the eaves, like the weary sighs of a quiet village after a long, uneventful day. Sitting by the dim light, Thu carefully mended Mr. Quang's old shirt, her eyes occasionally drifting toward Long's wedding photo on the altar. She said nothing, only let out a quiet sigh, as if trying to release the emotions that had been building up for days. Suddenly, the sound of a motorcycle engine shattered the silence. From a distance, a tall figure in sleek clothing stepped through the gate. Thu frowned slightly. It was Hui, Long's cousin, who had left the village years ago to seek his fortune elsewhere. Hui stopped his motorbike, exuding arrogance. His polished shoes touched the rain-dampened ground as he stepped off. Hui stood up, neatly folding the shirt in her hands, her gaze tinged with wariness. Unlike the rest of their relatives, Hui's return always carried an unsettling feeling. "Sister, how have you been?" His voice was slow and drawn out, laced with a subtle mockery. His eyes scanned her, stopping blatantly at her stomach. "It seems like you've changed a bit. Your belly's gotten bigger, hasn't it? Got some good news you haven't shared with the family?" His words felt like a dagger twisting in Thu's heart. She pressed her lips together, refusing to answer, lowering her gaze to avoid his. She had no intention of arguing, but the way Hui stood there, his smirk, his scrutinizing stare, made her feel as though she was being stripped bare before someone who wasn't even worth an explanation. Without waiting for an invitation, Hui casually stepped inside, leaving dirty water stains on the spotless tile floor. Mr. Quang, who had been sitting at the tea table, lifted his head slightly. His aged eyes rested on Hui with quiet scrutiny, as if he had already guessed the reason for his visit. "When did you get back?" His voice was calm yet firm, concealing any displeasure. Hui gave a faint smirk, pulling out a handkerchief to wipe his face, an exaggerated gesture as if to flaunt himself. "I just arrived this morning, heard the whole village buzzing with gossip about our family, so I thought I'd drop by and see what's going on. It's been a while since I last visited you and Sister Fu." Fu lowered her head, but she knew all too well. Hui hadn't come just to check in. Every word he spoke carried a chilling breeze, making the growing sense of unease even more palpable. He pulled out a chair and sat across from Mr. Quang, picking up the teacup from the table, twirling it in his hand without taking a sip. "Uncle." His voice was smooth, attempting to sound polite, yet his eyes gleamed with unmistakable provocation. "There are some matters in our family that need to be settled. Longin's assets, shouldn't they be redistributed? After all, he's gone now. I don't see the point in keeping everything in one place." Mr. Quang silently placed the teacup back on the table, his gaze locking onto Hui's. His face remained calm, but his aged hands trembled slightly. Long's belongings belong to his wife and child. No one has the right to dispute that. His voice was steady, not loud, but each word was firm, ringing with the weight of a warning. Hui, your family. More than anyone, you should understand this. Hui leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest, a smirk curling on his lips. A silent but blatant challenge. You say that, uncle, and I hear you, but the villagers, they have a different perspective. Hui leaned back in his chair, his gaze sharp, piercing through Thu. Isn't it strange? Brother Long has been gone for quite some time, and yet Sister Thu suddenly has good news? Does that seem reasonable to you? Thu sat silently in the corner, her hands clenched tightly together. Anger burned inside her, but she forced herself to stay calm. She knew that if she responded, it would only make things worse. Mr. Kwang's voice hardened, his words carrying a firm warning. You gotta know your limits. Don't let the gossip out there make you forget who you're speaking to. Hui stood up, adjusting his collar, his expression unshaken. I wouldn't dare forget, uncle. But this village is small. Sooner or later, everything comes to light. If you and Sister Thu have nothing to hide, then I'm in no rush either. I just came by to give a little reminder. He turned to leave, but just before stepping out the door, he glanced back. His eyes were cold, his voice laced with hidden meaning. Take care of yourself, Sister Thu. That belly of yours will soon be the talk of the village. The sound of Hui's motorbike faded into the distance, but the heavy atmosphere inside the house remained. Thu looked up to see Mr. Kwang staring at the door, his eyes clouded with worry. He said nothing, simply lifting his teacup to take a sip, but Thu could see his hand trembling. She quietly stood up and began to tidy up. Inside, Thu's anxiety swelled like a massive wave. Hui wasn't the type to give up easily until he got what he wanted. What had just happened made Thu realize that this was only the beginning. The real storm was starting to roll in, and she wasn't sure if she could make it through. However, despite his exhaustion, Mr. Kwang's eyes still shone with a steady light, as if to reassure her that no matter what happened, he would protect her and the child to the end. That evening, the peaceful village lay hidden under a thick mist, with the pale moonlight casting its weak glow on the winding dirt paths, illuminating the thatched roofs in a quiet serenity that had always defined the village. But for Thu, this silence only made her feel more suffocated. She had just returned through the gate, her hand trembling as she held an envelope. When she bent down to pick it up, she felt a chill run down her spine. Opening the envelope and reading the words inside, her body froze. If you don't leave this land, both you and your child will not find peace. Each word felt like a dagger driving deep into her heart. Thu couldn't hold back her tears as they streamed down her face. Her hands trembled so much that she could no longer hold the paper steadily. Thu wasn't a weak person, but the past days had drained almost all the strength from her. She folded the letter neatly and held it against her chest, as if embracing an unspeakable pain. Then she stepped into the house, her legs heavy. Inside the small house, the oil lamp's light cast shadows on Mr. Kwang's aged face. He sat on an old wooden chair, quietly sipping his tea. When he saw Thu enter, his gaze immediately paused. He could immediately tell something was wrong from the redness in her eyes and her uneasy demeanor. Thu, what's wrong, my child? He asked, his voice warm, yet tinged with concern. Thu didn't answer right away. She placed the envelope on the table and pushed it toward him. Dad, please read it. Her voice was choked with emotion. Mr. Kwang took the letter, slowly opening it. His calloused hands trembled as they skimmed over the threatening words. He read each word carefully, and his gaze grew darker with every line. When he finished, he placed the letter down on the table, leaned back, and took a deep breath. It's him again, he exclaimed, his voice a mix of anger and bitterness. Thu lowered her head, tears streaming down her face. Dad, I'm so scared. They won't stop. They're not just gossiping anymore. They want to drive us out. I don't know what to do. Mr. Kwang looked at his daughter-in-law, his heart heavy. She had endured so much hardship since losing Thu. Not only had she lost her beloved husband, but she also had to face the malicious rumors from the villagers. And now, as her belly grew larger, people's suspicions and gossip only intensified. But he couldn't let Thu bear it all alone. He was Long's father, the head of this family. Despite his age and frailty, he knew that now was the time to stand up and protect what remained of his family. After hearing her words, he spoke slowly but with firm conviction. I'm not afraid of anyone. This is your home and the home of my grandchild. We haven't done anything wrong, so there's no reason to be afraid. If they want to make a big deal of it, I will face it myself. I may be old, but no one will dare touch my children or grandchildren. I won't let it go. His voice was not loud, but each word seemed to carve through the silence of the house. His eyes no longer held the usual weariness, but shone with determination and resolve. His hands, though trembling, gripped the letter tightly, as if to crush those malicious threats. Thu lifted her head, her eyes swollen with tears as she looked at him. She didn't know what to say, but inside her a sense of warmth began to rise. Mr. Kwang's determination felt like a pillar, a sturdy wall that she could lean on. But Dad, there are so many of them. I'm scared. I'm afraid I won't be strong enough. she spoke in a trembling voice. Mr. Quang gently placed his hand on her shoulder. His gaze softened, yet still carried firmness. You're not alone, Thu. I'm here, and Long is too. He may no longer be with us, but I believe he's watching over you and our child. I've lost one child, but I won't let them take anything else from me. That night, after Thu went to her room, Mr. Quang stayed by the table. He stared at the faint flame of the oil lamp. His deep eyes seemed to hold an ocean of emotions. He had once thought that his old age would be peaceful, that Long would carry on the family and care for him when he was no longer strong. But fate had cruelly taken that hope away, leaving him with only a small daughter-in-law and an unborn grandchild. People he had to protect at all costs. The moon outside had risen high, its pale light casting over his weathered face, filled with wrinkles. But in his eyes there was no longer fatigue or sorrow, only an unyielding resolve. He knew the storm hadn't passed, and that Hui wouldn't give up easily, but he also knew that if he didn't stand firm, this family would have nowhere to turn. Long, he whispered, as if speaking to the photo on the altar. Don't worry, I will protect your mother and Thu. I promise, no matter how difficult it gets, I will not let our family fall. The wind outside blew fiercely, rustling the tree leaves, but inside Mr. Quang's heart, an unusual calm rose. No matter how great the storm, he was ready to face it. For the family, for his grandchild, and for the love he still held for his lost son. That night, heavy rain fell, and strong winds swept through the trees, shaking even the oldest branches. In the small room, Thu sat on the old wooden bed, gripping the edge tightly. Her face was pale, contorted in pain as the contractions came in relentless waves, making it impossible for her to cry out loud. Dad? Thu called out, her voice wavering with the sharp agony. Mr. Quang, who had been sitting at the table drinking tea, jumped up and rushed into the room. His eyes wide with panic. Can you hold on? I'll call someone to take you to the hospital. Thu shook her head, sweat pouring down her face. I can't wait any longer, Dad. It hurts so much. Without hesitation, Mr. Quang grabbed an old raincoat, threw it over his shoulders, and wrapped a thick scarf around Thu to keep her warm. Despite the rain hitting his face, despite the difficulty of walking on the muddy path with his aged legs, he didn't falter. Mr. Quang supported Thu, taking steady steps but hurried, as if racing against time. The sound of rain falling steadily on the makeshift bamboo umbrella mixed with the sound of his footsteps on the waterlogged dirt road. The small figures of the two swayed between the heavy downpour. Yet Mr. Quang did not stop. The strong wind blew, making the umbrella tilt, but he kept a firm grip on it, gently supporting Thu while whispering, "Just a little longer, my dear. We're almost there. Hold on. I'm here. You'll be okay." By the time they reached the clinic, Mr. Quang's coat was soaked, and his hands were trembling as he carried Thu through the door. The nurses quickly rushed out to support her and quickly led her into the delivery room. Outside, the rain continued to pour, but inside the small clinic, the soft yellow light created a warm yet tense atmosphere. The villagers, hearing about Thu's labor, had gathered outside, whispering worriedly amidst the rain. "I wonder if she'll be okay, if the baby will be healthy. Thu's been so weak lately. I just hope everything goes smoothly." Mr. Quang stood leaning against the wall, his hands clasped together, his gaze fixed on the delivery room door. His face was tense, his legs sore from standing, but he refused to sit down. Inside, a storm of worry and hope raged in his heart. Mr. Quang murmured a prayer. "Lamb, if you're still out there, please bless Thu and my grandson. Help me get through this night." Time seemed to slow down, dragging on. The howling wind outside blended with the sounds of Thu's moans from the delivery room, making Mr. Quang's heart tighten. He stood motionless, his hands clenched, his gaze fixed on the delivery room door, not leaving it for even a second. Then, like a miracle, amidst the cold night, the sound of a baby's cry rang out, pure and innocent, breaking the heavy silence and pulling everyone from their worries. The door to the room opened and a nurse stepped out, her face tired but beaming with joy. Her voice was filled with excitement as she announced, "It's a boy, congratulations!" Mr. Quang nearly collapsed, his legs giving way from the overwhelming joy, and tears streamed down his face. Outside, the villagers clapped, and gradually laughter filled the air, dispelling the chill of the rainy night. When Mr. Quang was allowed into the room, his trembling, aged hands shook as he saw his grandson nestled in Thu's arms. The baby was tiny, red, but its eyes shone brightly, strangely radiant. The baby's round face, each feature seemed to trace the image of Long when he was a child. His grandson had finally arrived. Mr. Quang's voice cracked with emotion. He reached out with trembling hands and gently touched the baby's cheek, feeling the warmth spread. It was like a small flame that drove away the cold. Though Thu was exhausted, her eyes shone with boundless happiness. She looked at Mr. Quang and softly said, "Dad, I did it. Your grandson is Long. He has returned to us. Mr. Quang held the baby close, his callous hands gently caressing the baby's soft skin. Tears fell from his eyes, mixing with the raindrops outside. But these were not tears of sorrow, but of joy and relief. Long, rest assured, your grandson is born now. I promise to care for him, to protect him with everything I have. Outside, the rain began to ease and the wind blew through, carrying the gentle scent of the earth. In Mr. Quang's heart, a new belief was kindled. The baby was not just a new life. He was the light, bringing life back to the family, the embodiment of Long, the hope that had sustained him throughout his life. The child's birth was like a flame warming Mr. Quang and Fu's hearts after days of darkness. The sound of the baby's laughter, the first coos of the grandson filled the emptiness in their small home. However, that joy didn't last long. Hui, with his insatiable greed and boundless cruelty, continued his attempts to destroy. He spread malicious rumors throughout the village. The baby? Who knows whose child it is? And what about the artificial insemination papers? Nowadays, anything can be forged. Hui's words were like venomous snakes, sowing doubt in the hearts of the villagers. The rumors spread like wildfire, and suspicious glances from the neighbors began to focus on the small house at the edge of the village. Some even didn't hesitate to ask Mr. Quang directly, Uncle Quang, there are a lot of rumors going around. Are the papers real, or are they just to cover up? These questions felt like knives cutting into Mr. Quang's heart, but he didn't respond, only answering with a determined look. I've lived more than half my life and I've never done anything against my conscience. Whether people believe it or not, I don't need to explain. But we didn't stop there. One day he appeared in front of Mr. Quang's house, accompanied by a stranger. He sat down at the table, acting as though he were the homeowner. Hui's voice was full of challenge. Uncle Quang, I think we need to clear things up. This is Mr. Keen from the Land Registry Office. Today we will check your property documents to make sure everything is transparent. I'm sure you don't mind, right? Hui, holding her child in the room, felt her heart tighten when she heard Hui's voice. She stepped out, her eyes full of worry, but Mr. Quang quickly raised his hand to stop her, signaling for her to stay calm. My property documents and longs are clear, with certification from the local authorities. No one has the right to inspect them unless I permit it. Mr. Quang said coldly, his voice emotionless. We sneered, his eyes flashing with provocation. That's what you say, but the villagers don't think the same. You know, documents can be forged. I think if everything was clear, you wouldn't be so worried. Mr. Quang stood up, his gaze sharp like a knife, causing Hui to falter for a moment. Hui, I've put up with you long enough, but if you continue causing trouble, I'll take you to court. Don't think I won't do anything. The villagers began to gather around the house, their whispers growing louder. Hui kept his smirk, but his eyes couldn't hide the anger brewing inside. Fine, uncle. Go ahead and try. But don't forget, everyone here is watching. I think this matter will need to be clarified sooner or later. He stood up, adjusted his collar, and turned to leave, leaving a heavy atmosphere behind. As Hui's figure disappeared, Mr. Quang exhaled deeply, his hands gripping the edge of the table, trying to hold back the tremors of anger. Du stepped closer, placing her hand on his shoulder, speaking gently. Dad, let's just ignore him. I'm worried that this will wear you out. Mr. Quang turned to look at her, his eyes filled with determination. Du, you have to understand, if we stay silent, he will only push further. This is your home, your child's longs. No one has the right to touch it, and I won't let that happen. That night, Mr. Quang sat at the table, the small oil lamp casting shadows on his aged face full of wrinkles. His hands turned over each page of the artificial insemination certificates and Long's property files. His eyes were focused as if contemplating a long battle. Long, if you were here, you'd do this in my place. But now, it's just me. Don't worry, I won't let anyone harm our family. The wind outside howled, and the rustling of leaves filled the quiet night. However, in Mr. Quang's heart, the fire of determination still burned fiercely. He knew Hui was a dangerous man, but he also knew that the love and responsibility he felt for his family would always be stronger than any threat. The day of the meeting was set, and the whole village of Bình was abuzz, as though preparing for a gathering. From early morning, the villagers had gathered at the family church, where the meeting would take place. The atmosphere was tense, with everyone seated in their places, their curious eyes fixed on Mr. Quang and Hui. Everyone knew this was not just a family matter, but one that involved the honor of the William family, the truth, and trust. Mr. Quang walked in, his posture resolute despite the weight of the years on his shoulders. Fu followed behind, holding their young child in her arms, her eyes briefly showing concern. The child slept soundly, seemingly unaffected by the storm brewing around them. As for Hui, he was already seated on the mat, his face cold yet filled with a smug satisfaction, as though he were waiting to witness a collapse. Dear relatives, today I have invited you all here to clarify the recent rumors. Some have said that this child is not Long's biological son, and that my documents are forged. Today, I I want everyone to know the truth. Mr. Quang slowly opened his old briefcase, taking out a stack of papers. His rough, calloused hands gently flipped through each page and laid them down on the mat, right in front of everyone. These are the certificates of artificial insemination, with the official seal of the Central Hospital. This is the confirmation from the local government regarding Long's inheritance rights, passed down to his children and grandchildren. Everything is clear and transparent. The room fell into complete silence. Everyone from the elderly to the young stared intently at the documents with curious and serious expressions. Whispers started to spread, but no one had any more doubts when they saw the bold red seal on each document. Hui, who had been lounging casually, now sat up straight, his face showing a brief moment of tension, his hands clenched tightly on his thighs. He hadn't expected Mr. Quang to be this well prepared. You say that, but who can really verify if these documents are genuine or fake? Hui attempted to argue, his voice trembling, though he tried to maintain his calm. Mr. Quang looked at him with sharp eyes, like a blade. If you still have doubts, you can take these documents to the authorities or the court. I'm not afraid because I haven't done anything wrong. But if you keep slandering me, I will take this matter to the law. This is not just my honor, but the honor of our entire family. The room fell silent again, and no one dared to speak. Miwi couldn't say anything more. His face turned red with shame as his eyes swept over the people in the room. Now only cold or disappointed looks were directed at him. As people began to stand up and prepare to leave, believing everything had ended, Hui suddenly stood up. He walked to the center of the mat, turned his back to the crowd, and before leaving the meeting hall, he spat out a bitter remark. I don't believe it. When the child grows up, everything will become clear. Those words fell into the air like a sharp knife, making the room feel cold for a moment. Tu hugged her child tightly in her arms. Her eyes were filled with tears, not from fear, but from the sense of being hurt. She looked at Mr. Quang, seeking some comfort. Although Mr. Quang's face remained calm, his old hands placed on the mat clenched tightly to the point of trembling. He slowly stood up, his eyes following Hui's retreating figure. Outside, a sense of sadness crept into his heart, not because of the threats from Hui, but from the regret over a relative who had lost family ties due to greed and selfishness. Thu, he said, his voice soft but firm as he turned to look at his daughter-in-law. Don't worry, no matter what he says, no matter what he does in the future, I will protect you and the child. This is our family. No one had the right to take away Mr. Quang's vow, which resonated like a pledge in the stillness of the afternoon, making Thu feel her heart soften. The baby in her arms gently stirred, its tiny hand gripping her shirt, as if to remind her that no matter what storms may come, they would always have each other and a future full of hope. After the meeting, the village of Bình Yên truly returned to its peaceful name. After his defeat, Hui left without any reason to cause further chaos. No one in the family or the neighborhood heard any more news about him. His silence seemed to be the only way to hide the shame he had brought upon himself. The small house at the end of the village, once filled with prying eyes and malicious rumors, was now filled with the sound of children's laughter. The baby, with bright eyes and a round face, had become the great joy of the entire family, the family of Thu and Mr. Quang. They poured all their love into caring for the child, seeing it as a way to continue the life of Long, the son and husband they loved most. On that afternoon, the golden sunlight filtered through the trees, shining down on the yard, making the dewdrops still resting on the leaves sparkle. Mr. Quang sat on the old wooden chair, holding his grandson in his arms. The little boy was just starting to walk, his tiny hands gripping tightly onto his grandfather, his mouth making soft, clear sounds. Mr. Quang gently stroked the soft hair of the child, his eyes full of affection. The wrinkles on his aging face seemed to relax, and a warm smile spread across his lips. Long, he whispered, his voice deep and gentle, as though speaking to his late son. Don't worry. I and Thu will raise this boy to be a good person. This is the greatest pride of mine. He is so much like you, both in his eyes and in his smile. I will teach him to live kindly, to love, so he can carry on the dreams you once had. Thu stood quietly under the house's porch, watching Mr. Quang and their little son. The soft golden sunlight bathed the two of them, creating a peaceful scene that was deeply moving. She felt her heart filled with emotion, not only because of happiness, but also out of gratitude. She knew that without Mr. Quang, she would have had a hard time overcoming the darkest days of her life. He was not just a pillar of support for her, but also the one who preserved and protected everything left of this small family. Dad, she whispered, her voice almost blending with the wind, thank you for everything. Because of you, I have the life I do today. Mr. Quang turned to look at her, his eyes softening. You don't need to thank me, Thu. This is your family. This is my grandson. I'm just doing what Long would have wanted me to do. I'm old now, but as long as I see you both happy, I am content. The evening breeze swept through, carrying the faint scent of ripening rice from the distant fields. Thu sat down beside him, holding the baby, feeling the warmth of her son in her arms. The storm had passed, and now she truly found peace in this small home. Every day, Thu felt grateful for life. Despite all the losses, life had also given her the strength to endure. Her little child was the light, the hope, and the new life for her and Mr. Quang. The sun slowly disappeared behind the distant hills. The vibrant sunset bathed the small house, and the laughter of the child echoed through the space, blending with the sounds of birds returning to their nests, creating a peaceful melody in the countryside. Somewhere far away, Tu believes that Long is smiling, watching over them with pride, knowing that the family remains strong, loving, and resilient, just as he had hoped. Ladies and gentlemen, we sincerely thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story, a heartfelt journey about love, patience, and the strength to overcome adversity. Through the images of Mr. Quang and Thu, we are reminded that family is not just a place we belong, but also a source of strength that helps us stand firm in the face of life's storms. This story delivers a simple yet profound message. Despite life's many hardships, as long as there is love and sacrifice, we can keep the flame of happiness and hope alive. If this story has touched your heart, we would greatly appreciate your support by liking the video, sharing your thoughts in the comments, and especially subscribing to our channel so you don't miss out on future meaningful stories. Your continued support is the driving force behind our mission to spread positive values. Thank you, and we wish you and your family health, happiness, and peace. Sincerely,